The 209th minute of continuous crying was the one that finally broke Miss Prable's composure, not mine. I counted it because counting was the only thing I still had permission to do. Not touch, not offer, not step past the yellow line taped across the nursery floor that separated staff who were allowed near the executive tier infants and staff like me who mopped up after them. 4 professional night nurses had rotated through in 6 days. 2 had lasted less than a shift. The twins, 9 months old, one dark-haired and furious, one fair and silent in the particular way that scared me more than the screaming, had not slept in what the intake sheet politely called an extended period. Do something useful, Pharaoh. Or go home. Prable snapped, bouncing the dark-haired twin against a shoulder that had clearly given up, believing it would help. I had been doing something useful for 4 years in that building, in the sub-basement daycare wing, where the children of assistants and mailroom clerks got left, while their parents worked 12-hour shifts for a shipping empire none of them would ever see the top floor of. I had been a level 2 NICU nurse before that at Bellhaven Memorial, until a medication error that was never mine got hung around my neck like a bell so a hospital's insurance company could sleep at night. I still carried my grandmother's nursing pin in my uniform pocket, a tiny enamel lighthouse, tarnished at the base where 40 years of her thumb had worn the gilt away. She used to say the same 6 words to me on my worst nursing school nights. "I'll keep the light on until you're steady." I said them now, under my breath, to no one. "Give her to me," I said. Prable laughed, short and ugly. "You want to hold the Kestrel twins. I want them to stop screaming before someone upstairs hears it and fires all of us." That argument worked where compassion hadn't. She thrust the dark-haired one at me like she was glad to be rid of the weight, and I felt the small body slam into fight before it even registered whose arms it had landed in. And then, because bodies remember things minds haven't caught up to yet, it didn't. I turned her sideways, spine against my forearm, her weight low and secure the way no one had been holding her in 3 straight days of panicked upright bouncing. I hummed. Not a lullaby, exactly. 3 notes, low, the ones my mother used to hum over a stove that never had quite enough on it. I found the fair twin next, tucked her against my other side, one baby anchored on each hip like ballast. 90 seconds. That was all it took. 90 seconds, and the room went so quiet I heard the elevator arrive 2 floors up. The doors to the nursery wing opened on a woman I had seen only in framed photographs in the lobby, and never once in the flesh. She did not look like her photographs. Her photographs did not carry the scent that hit me from 10 feet away, salt spray and struck flint, cold and precise, a scent that belonged on a ship's deck in a gale, not a corporate hallway. She stood in the doorway in a suit that cost more than my yearly rent, staring at 2 silent, sleeping infants in the arms of the daycare wing's lowest-ranked aide, and something in her face broke and reassembled itself so fast I almost missed it. "How?" Isolde Kestrel said. Not a question, a demand for the mechanism. Football hold. White noise close to a heartbeat rhythm. They were overstimulated, not hungry. I kept my voice low so I wouldn't undo 90 seconds of work. Someone needs to turn the hallway lights down before the next shift change. Prable started to explain who I was, the fired nurse hire, the cheap one, the one who mops, and Isolde Kestrel lifted one hand a half inch, and the explanation died in Prable's throat. "Get your things," Isolde said to me. "You're not going back to the sub-basement." I should have asked where I was going instead. I didn't. I had a sleeping baby's heartbeat against my collarbone and my grandmother's pin warm from my own thumb pressed into it, and some part of me, the part that had been invisible in that building for 4 years, understood with a lurch under my ribs that whatever came through that elevator door next was going to change the shape of my life. I found out I was right within the hour. Isolde Kestrel did not do introductions the way other people did. She did tests. In her private office on the 40th floor, with both twins finally down for a nap in a bassinet that cost more than my car, she watched me change a diaper blowout that would have made a lesser employee resign, watched me catch the fair twin Koruline, she told me. Her name was Koruline, the dark one was Junie. Before a rolling fall off a changing table, Isolde herself had turned her back on for 4 seconds too long and watched me talk, low and steady, through a colic spike at 11 that night without once raising my voice. "You were a nurse," she said. It wasn't really a question either. Everything about her came out declarative, like she'd already decided the shape of the world and was only informing me of it. NICU, Level 2. Belhaven Memorial. I kept my chin up saying it. I had learned to. I was blamed for a dosing error that wasn't mine. My supervising physician cut corners to cover a staffing shortage, and I was the one without the seniority to survive the review. Do you have proof of that? No, that's why I'm folding laundry in a basement instead of running a unit. She looked at me for 3 full seconds. I counted, because counting was still the only thing that steadied my hands around strangers with that much power, and something in her face shifted from assessment into decision. "I'm offering you a position," she said. "Live-in caregiver to my daughters, full medical authority in my absence, triple your current salary, and a floor of this building to sleep on instead of a bus route home at midnight." A pause, the first uncertain beat I'd heard from her. Their last 3 nurses left within a week. I need someone they don't unravel. Why me and not an agency? Because an agency sends me a resume. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "You held both of my daughters, and the crying stopped in under 2 minutes. I don't care what a piece of paper says you are. I care what just happened in that room." I thought about the lighthouse pin in my pocket. I thought about 4 years of being told I was replaceable by people who had never once asked what I used to be. "I'll need my own space to sleep, and 1 day off in 7, non-negotiable," I said, because some ember in me still knew my own worth even when the world kept insisting I check it at the door. Something that was almost a smile moved through her expression and left before it fully landed. Done. That night I stood at the window of a residential floor I hadn't known existed 30 stories above the sub-basement I'd started my morning in. A lighthouse pin in one hand and a new keycard in the other, and I understood that the woman 2 rooms down, asleep for the first time in a week, with her daughters finally quiet, had just handed me a door into a world built to remind me at every turn that I did not belong in it. I went in anyway. The residential floor of Kestrel Tower was not a floor so much as a country with its own customs, marble that swallowed footsteps, a housekeeper, Mrs. Aldous, silver-haired and quietly amused by everything, who showed me to a suite bigger than my old apartment and told me, without being asked, exactly which of the household staff would sneer and exactly which would come around. "Give it 3 weeks," she said, folding a towel that didn't need folding. "The ones who matter will notice you before that." The ones who mattered were slower than the ones who didn't. Isolde's household staff had opinions about a sub-basement daycare aide sleeping down the hall from the Kestrel twins, and those opinions arrived as clipped hallway silences and a chief of staff, Greer Nash, who looked at me across the breakfast table on my second morning like I was a line item she hadn't approved. "She's had 4 caregivers try and fail in 6 days, Greer said, not to me. To Isolde, as though I weren't holding Koruline 2 feet away. "What makes this one different?" "She stayed the whole night," Isolde said, not looking up from her tablet. "None of the others managed 6 hours. Loyalty tested for 1 night isn't loyalty." "No," Isolde agreed. But competence tested for one night is competence, and I'll build the loyalty myself. I filed that sentence away like it was something I might need later. It was. The wealth gap announced itself in textures before anyone said a word about it. The weight of the nursery door, hinges that didn't creak because someone paid to make sure they never would, a closet of twin clothing that cycled through more outfits in a week than I owned in a year, a kitchen where Mrs. Aldous, 3 days in, set down a tin of loose orange cardamom tea beside my morning coffee without comment. "I didn't order this," I said. "No, Mrs." Aldous agreed, not looking up. "Miss Kestrel did. Said you mentioned your grandmother used to make it. I hadn't remembered mentioning it. I had mentioned it once, exhausted, at 2 a.m. during a feeding, half to myself. Isolde had been in the doorway that night, unnoticed, listening the way she seemed to listen to everything, filing it away the same careful way I filed away her sentences. That was the first proof. It would not be the last. The identity clues about her came slower and darker. A locked door at the end of the residential hall that Mrs. Aldous steered every tour firmly away from. A portrait in the private study of a woman with Junie's exact chin, dust-free in a room otherwise untouched. A framed newspaper clipping, face down in a drawer I wasn't meant to be organizing, but did anyway on a slow afternoon. Kestrel Vane Maritime mourns sudden loss of Marguerite Vane Kestrel. 31. I put it back exactly as I'd found it and said nothing, but some grief-shaped shadow in Isolde's stillness made a great deal more sense after that. The first charged touch happened over something absurd. Isolde, home early and exhausted, attempted to install an infant car seat in a vehicle clearly not designed for one, muttering low curses in what I would later learn was maritime insurance jargon repurposed as swearing, and lost a fight with a buckle in front of her entire household staff. I knelt beside her to help. Our hands collided over the latch, and the scent of her, salt and struck flint, bloomed so close and warm I forgot, for one full second, how to finish the sentence I'd been saying. "You keep doing that," she said quietly, not moving her hand away first. "Doing what?" "Fixing things I can't." "It's the job," I said, though it didn't feel like the job anymore, not entirely. Not with her knuckles still resting an inch from mine on a car seat buckle neither of us was in a hurry to finish latching. She was the one who pulled back first. She always was. In those early weeks, the restraint in her hands more honest than anything she said aloud. The warning came 4 days later, in the shape of a woman I hadn't met yet. Odile Vane arrived without an appointment, the way people do when they believe the building already belongs to them. She was Marguerite's sister. I learned that from the way Mrs. Aldis's shoulders went rigid at the sound of the elevator, poised, exquisitely dressed, and venomous in a register so calm it took me a full minute to recognize the threat under it. "So this is the replacement," Odile said, looking me over like an appraiser pricing a used car. Her gaze flicked to the twins in my arms, and something colder moved behind her eyes. "Isolde does love a project. Tell me, dear, does the nurse know why her last 3 predecessors really left?" "Odile," Isolde's voice from the doorway carried a warning I felt in my sternum. "I'm only being neighborly." Odile's smile didn't move past her mouth. "There's a hearing coming, Isolde. The board will want to know exactly who's raising Marguerite's daughters while you're busy playing house with the help." She let that sit, then turned, unhurried, heels precise against the marble. "I'll see you both soon." The door closed. The room stayed cold a long time after she left it. "What hearing?" I asked. Isolde's jaw worked once before she answered. "Nothing you need to worry about." Which was, I would learn, exactly the sentence people used right before something became precisely that. The truth came out on a Tuesday, over a dinner Isolde had barely touched. Marguerite died 11 months ago, she said, staring at a spot on the table like it owed her an explanation. Postpartum hemorrhage. I was in a board meeting ODL insisted couldn't be moved. By the time I reached the hospital, she stopped, started again in the flat, controlled register I'd learned meant she was one sentence from breaking. My mother built this company on the belief that control was the only thing that couldn't be taken from you. I believed her for 34 years. Then I watched control save nothing. That's not what killed her, I said, careful. A meeting didn't kill her. A hemorrhage did. I know the medicine. Her eyes, when they finally came up to mine, were raw in a way I hadn't seen from her yet. I don't know how to unlearn 34 years of being told that if I just held on tighter, nothing would slip. I reached across the table before I decided to, my hand over hers, over knuckles gone white around a fork she wasn't using. Then don't hold tighter, I said. Just hold on to something that holds back. She turned her hand over under mine. Didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't need her to. 2 mornings later, both twins spiked fevers within an hour of each other, 104 for Junie, 103.6 for Koruline, and the on-call pediatrician, 40 minutes out in traffic, told us over the phone to give it time before panicking. I did not give it time. I had spent 4 years in a NICU reading the difference between a virus and a crisis in the pattern of a cry, and Junie's had gone reedy and thin in a way that made every hair on my arms rise. Ice bath, gradual, not shock cold. Now I was already moving. Isolde, get me the thermometer log from this week. I need to see if this spiked or climbed. She didn't question me. That was the moment, I think the true moment, when whatever remained of employer and employee between us finished dissolving. She moved at my direction. With the same absolute trust she gave her own instincts, fetching, holding, timing, her hands steady around a task with no boardroom in it at all. 98.9, I said 40 minutes later, both fevers finally breaking, both girls limp and cool and safe against us on the nursery floor where we'd ended up sitting, side by side, backs against the crib. They're all right. Isolde didn't answer right away. When I looked over, she was watching me instead of the twins, something undone in her face that had nothing to do with fever. I watched the security footage, she said quietly. From Belhaven, after you told me about the dosing error, I had someone pull it. My stomach dropped. Isolde, you didn't make that error. The record's been quietly buried, but the timestamps are there. Your supervising physician altered a chart 4 hours before the incident to cover an understaffed shift. Her hand found mine again, over a sleeping baby's blanket. I should have told you the moment I knew. I wanted to find a way to fix it before I said the words out loud. That's not how you fix things for people, I said, throat tight. You tell them the truth and let them decide what to do with it. Noted, she said, and something like a real smile finally reached her eyes. I kissed her before either of us decided to be careful about it, and then stopped, an inch away, my grandmother's steadiness finally catching up with the rest of me. Tell me to stop, and I will. Don't, Isolde said, low, absolute the way only she ever was. Don't stop. So I didn't. The days after that were softer than any I had lived in years. Isolde told me the rest of it in pieces, over cooking lessons she was terrible at and bath times she'd started actually enjoying, how her mother had built Kestrel Vane on the doctrine that softness was a liability line item, how she'd married Marguerite, believing love was simply the merger that made the most strategic sense, and had only understood, watching me hum 3 tuneless notes into her daughter's hair, what she'd been missing the whole time. Say it again, she told me once, half asleep, Koruline snoring softly against her chest. The thing your grandmother used to say. I'll keep the light on until you're steady, I said. Say it like a promise. It is one. Greer Nash caught us like that one morning, twins between us on the nursery floor, Isolde laughing, actually laughing, at a onesie she'd put on backward twice, and stood in the doorway a long moment before speaking. 15 years I've worked for this woman, Greer said finally. I have never once seen her wait for anyone. She looked at me, something unbending in her expression for the first time since I'd arrived. Don't waste it. I didn't get the chance to answer before a courier arrived with a thick cream envelope, kestrel vein letterhead, Odile's signature on the cover sheet. Isolde's face went to stone reading it. Emergency custody petition, she said, filed this morning. Odile's alleging negligence, missed meetings, an unlicensed, unstable caregiver hired without vetting. Her eyes came up to mine, cold now, with something other than grief. Hearings in 9 days. The warmth in the room didn't leave all at once. It just went quiet, the way a house does right before a storm reaches the harbor. The story broke online 4 days before the hearing, and it broke with my name in the headline. Shipping heiress's twins in care of disgraced nurse. Sources say caregiver lost license after patient death. A photo of me from the daycare center's staff badge, unflattering and 3 years old, beside a photo of Isolde, looking colder than I'd ever seen her look at me. The article cited an anonymous hospital source. It said my license had been fully revoked. It said the word fraud twice in the first paragraph. Priya called me before I'd finished reading it, breathless. It's garbage, Tam. Everyone at the daycare knows it's garbage. Everyone at the daycare isn't a family court judge, I said. Isolde found me in the nursery an hour later, phone in hand, jaw tight enough to crack. Odell's lawyers leaked it. I can prove it, the timing, the sourcing. It has her fingerprints on every line. She stopped in front of me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I watched Isolde Kestrel look uncertain about what to do with her own hands. I should have kept you further from this. I dragged you into a fight that was never yours. I walked in on my own. I set the phone face down, because I refused to let it decide the shape of the next minute of my life. Don't you dare apologize for the parts of this that were good. She didn't answer with words. She answered by pulling me in, forehead against mine, both of us breathing the same unsteady air for a long moment before either of us moved again. The hearing didn't wait for us to be ready. 9 days became 3 when Odile's attorneys filed for an emergency ex parte order, and they timed it with surgical precision. For a morning, Isolde was legally required to attend a shareholder vote she could not delay without ceding control of the company entirely. A vote, I would learn far too late, that Odile herself had maneuvered onto the calendar months earlier, patient as rot. I was alone in the nursery at 9:14 a.m., when the sheriff's deputy and 2 caseworkers arrived with paperwork and a court seal that made my stomach turn to ice. 48 hours, the caseworker said, not unkindly, lifting Junie from her crib while I stood frozen, powerless, a piece of paper outranking every instinct in my body. Pending the full hearing. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not listed as a legal guardian. I'm not asking to be their guardian, I said, voice cracking. I'm asking you not to take 2 9-month-olds out of the only stable routine they've had in a year. It didn't matter. Paper mattered. I watched both cribs empty in under 6 minutes, watched the nursery door close behind 2 caseworkers and everything I'd built in that room, and stood alone in a silence so complete I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Isolde came home at 6:40 that evening to find me on the nursery floor exactly where they'd left me, my grandmother's lighthouse pin pressed so hard into my palm it had left a mark, and 2 empty cribs between us like a wound neither of us knew how to close. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she sat down on the floor beside me, careful, like something in the room might shatter if she moved too fast. "We get them back," she said. Not a question, not a hope. A declarative, the way she said everything that mattered. However we have to. I called Priya first, because Priya still had access to hospital scheduling systems from her cousin's records job, and because I needed someone who believed me before I could ask anyone else to. She found the shift log from the night of my dosing error within an hour. Timestamps that had somehow survived the clean version Belhaven had submitted to the state board, showing my supervising physician, Dr. Holt, altering a medication chart 4 hours before the incident to hide the fact that the unit had been running at half its required staffing. "He's still practicing," Priya said, disgust thick in her voice. "He never even got a formal review." Greer found the second thread. She'd been quietly watching ODL's board conduct for 2 years, waiting, she admitted, for exactly this kind of overreach. A records clerk at Belhaven, 3 months behind on a mortgage, had received a wire transfer for $11,000 the same week the forged termination letter had surfaced in ODL's custody filing. A transfer traced, with a little digging Greer wouldn't fully explain, back to a shell account with vain family fingerprints all over it. "She's not doing this for Marguerite," Greer said, spreading the documents across Isolde's desk at midnight. "She's doing it because the twins' trust unlocks board voting shares she wants controlled by a guardian she can manage. You, or worse, nobody." Isolde read the documents in silence, and I watched something in her go past grief and past fury into a stillness that frightened me more than either. "I'm going to end her," Isolde said. Quiet, absolute Isolde. I put a hand on her arm before she could reach for her phone. "If you go in there and burn her down with rage instead of proof, you hand her lawyers exactly the unstable narrative they've already printed about you. Don't become the monster the headline said you were. Let the truth do the ending. It's better at it than we are." She stood there a long moment, breathing hard, and then, slowly, deliberately, set the phone back down. "Fine," she said. "We do it your way." We did it my way at 9 the next morning, in a conference room on the 40th floor, with Odile summoned under the pretense of a routine board update and no idea what was waiting for her. She swept in exactly as she'd swept into every other room I'd seen her in, poised, certain, already halfway to victory in her own mind. That certainty lasted until Greer set the wire transfer records on the table, until Priya's recorded call with the records clerk, who had, faced with federal fraud exposure, agreed to cooperate within the hour, played through the room's speakers in his own shaking voice, confessing exactly who had paid him and why. "You forged a woman's medical termination to steal her reputation," Isolde said, each word landing like a closing hull door. "You bribed a hospital employee. You timed a shareholder vote to strip me of the ability to protect my own children. All of it, Odile, to control a trust that was never yours." Odile's composure held for 3 full seconds before it cracked down the middle. "She was my sister's company too," Odile spat, the venom finally showing its true shape. Marguerite would still be alive if Isolde had ever once put family before that board seat, and I will not watch some daycare charity case raise her children while Isolde plays house. That's enough, Isolde said. And it was, because security was already in the doorway, because the recorded confession was already forwarded to the family court judge, because 3 days later, Odile Vane stood in a courtroom and heard the words fraud and forgery and embezzlement used correctly about her in front of the same board that had once feared her. The twins came home that afternoon, and I held them both so long my arms ached, and neither of them cried at all. The public hearing, when it finally came, wasn't the fight we'd braced for. It was a formality dressed as a courtroom. Because the truth had already done its work, Odile's petition dismissed within the first 20 minutes. The forged letter entered into evidence as exactly what it was, the judge's closing words restoring full, uncontested guardianship to Isolde, with a bluntness that made the gallery go quiet. Miss Preble, subpoenaed for a character statement she'd expected to use against me, recanted every word of it under oath rather than perjure herself once the clerk's confession was public record. She was let go from Kestrel Vane's daycare wing within the month. I felt almost nothing when I heard, which surprised me more than fury would have. Isolde stood outside the courthouse afterward, cameras waiting, and said the thing she hadn't said inside four walls yet. For 11 months, I told myself control was the only thing that couldn't be taken from me, she said, voice carrying farther than she probably meant it to. I was wrong. The only thing that couldn't be taken was the woman who held my daughters when I couldn't hold anything at all. I love her. I intend to spend the rest of my life proving I noticed. I didn't cry until we were back inside the elevator, alone, both of us laughing through it because neither of us had words steady enough yet for anything else. That night, with the twins finally asleep and the whole tower quiet around us, Isolde traced one finger along my collarbone where the lighthouse pin usually sat and stopped, deliberate, at the curve of my neck. I want to claim you, she said. Not tonight if you're not ready. Not ever, if that's the truth of it. But I need you to hear me say the want out loud. Because I spent a year believing wanting things out loud was the thing that killed people I loved. Ask me with your words, I said, and I'll answer with mine. Tamsin Farrow, will you let me mark you as mine, not owned, not claimed like property, but chosen, the way you chose to walk back into that nursery on your worst day and pick up 2 screaming babies nobody else wanted to hold? Yes, I said, and meant it with everything 4 years of invisibility had never managed to erase. Tell me to stop and I will, she echoed, low against my throat. Don't, I said. Don't stop. The bond snapped into place like a held breath finally releasing, warm and absolute, and for the first time since Belhaven Memorial had taught me my worth could be revised without my consent, I felt entirely, unmistakably seen. 14 months later, the tower's 40th floor nursery had 2 more windows than it used to, cut in on Isolde's order because, she said, morning light was wasted on grief, and she intended to waste none of it going forward. Junie and Koruline, 23 months old and thundering across the floor on legs that had only recently learned to be trusted, had a vocabulary of exactly 9 words between them, 4 of which were variations on tam tam, shouted with the specific joy only a toddler can bring to a syllable. Odile Vane was serving the 2nd year of a federal sentence for wire fraud and embezzlement, stripped of every share the Vane name had once guaranteed her, the trust the twins would inherit at 18 sat, finally, exactly as untouched as it should have been. Dr. Holt's medical license had been quietly, permanently revoked the same month my own record was cleared and sealed with a formal apology from the state board that I keep, still in the same pocket that once held only a tarnished pin. Greer Nash gave the toast at our bonding ceremony that spring, small, garden-lit, Mrs. Aldous crying openly in the front row, and it was short, and it was exactly enough. 15 years I watched this woman build an empire out of not needing anyone, Greer said, raising her glass toward the 2 of us, and 2 flower-crowned toddlers refusing to sit still between us. I'm glad I lived to see her lose that particular skill. Isolde knelt in that same garden an hour later, twins shrieking with delight at the novelty of their mother on the ground, and opened a small box holding a locket shaped, unmistakably, like a lighthouse. "I asked a jeweler to copy your grandmother's pin," she said, hands steadier than I'd ever seen them, "because I wanted you to have proof every day that the light you kept on for strangers finally found its way home, too." "Ask me properly," I said, laughing through tears I'd stopped bothering to hide from her months ago. "Marry me," Isolde Kestrel said. Not a question, the way she said everything that mattered. "Yes," I said, and meant it the way I'd meant every yes since the day I picked two screaming, overlooked children up off a nursery floor and discovered, in the 90 seconds it took them to go quiet, exactly what I had been worth all along. We stood together that evening at the window Isolde had cut new light into. Twins finally drowsy against our shoulders, the harbor beyond the glass gone gold and still. Somewhere out past the last pier, a real lighthouse blinked its slow, patient rhythm across the water, the same steady pulse my grandmother had once promised me I would carry for other people until I finally let someone carry it back. Being invisible had never been the truth of me. It had only ever been the wait, and the wait was over. The end.